We're glad you're here for our Wednesday webinar. We're slowly loading the list right now. Welcome, everyone. Those of you who are here in the webinar, if you wouldn't mind taking to the chat function on the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking that, and then typing in who you are and where you're from. All of our panelists love to see who's here, so this is a great way for you to introduce yourself. So please introduce yourself using the chat function so we can see you, at least virtually, all right? Great. Good. Glad to see you, Charles, Candy, and good. Look at everyone chiming in. It's very good. Keep that chat waterfall going.
The Amos.
All right. I see all the names popping in. And let's see. Good. I think most of us are here. We're going to get ready to get started. We're glad you're here. Welcome to the Wednesday webinar. If you've just come into the room, please make sure you take to the chat waterfall and type in who you are and where you're from. Again, this week we're back in our webinar interface. And so we're hopeful that you will be familiar with this. If you're not, let me explain very quickly. The Zoom webinar interface is a little different than the regular Zoom meeting interface. In the Zoom webinar interface, the only people you see on video are the presenters, or in this case, panelists. And so you'll see their video. All of the participants are listed under the participant button, and you can use the chat function to either chat with just the panelists or with everyone who's here. And the way you do that is in the chat waterfall that's appearing probably to the right or on top of the interface. You'll see the place where you type in your chat. There's a little pop-up menu there, and when you click on it, it will say all panelists, or if you click on it, it will switch to say all panelists and attendees. So if you only want the panelists to see what you write, you would leave it as all panelists. If you want everybody to see what you write, you would change it to all panelists and attendees. And in the same way, you can send a chat to an individual person if you want to do so. So with that said, I think we're about ready to go. My name is Craig Brown. I serve as the Executive Director of Congregational Development for our annual conference. I am one of the individuals that helps put together the Wednesday webinars, and my chief partners in that work, my colleagues, are Selby Ewing, who's our Director of Communications, and Tua Yang, who is our Communications Associate. And we're really, really excited to be able to continue to bring you these Wednesday webinars. Today's webinar is in a format we've never done before. It's a panel discussion. And today our panel discussion is going to be focused around youth and young adult ministries and how we engage in those ministries in the midst of pandemic. And so as we were thinking about this webinar, of course, we started thinking about all the great leaders we have in our annual conference that work in youth and young adult ministries, not only in local churches, but campus-based ministries as well. And of course, the person who really leads this effort for us as an annual conference is the Reverend Dr. Fel Cow, who is our Director of Youth, Young Adult, and Camping Ministries. Fel, we're so glad that you could lead us today, and he is going to be our facilitator for our panel discussion today. He's going to be leading the conversation with all of our panelists, engaging them in a bunch of different topics, and leading them through that. When we're done with the panel discussion, there'll be a time for questions and answers. And the Q&A time will be an important one, so we can hear from our panelists some of the responses to your questions. If you look at the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see a button that says Q&A. If you click on that button, it allows you to type in your question that you would want to ask. So when you're ready to have or a question comes to mind, even in the midst of the panel discussion, you might think of the question, but you don't want to lose it. Just go to that Q&A button, click on it, and type out your question. And when we get to that Q&A time, we'll be sure to go through those questions and respond to them. With that said, again, welcome. We're glad that you're with us. We hope this is a time to resource you and the work that you're doing in our local church and how you're reaching out in this very, very challenging season that we're in. Pandemic all around, not only pandemic from a health perspective, but pandemic from a social and cultural perspective as we deal with the great upheaval happening within our nation, the lurch that I pray and hope we're about to take forward in social justice, in combating institutional racism across our country. And so today's conversation is important because if you've looked at all at those marching in streets, those protesting, those raising the voice of advocacy, you're going to see young people everywhere. Young people everywhere, and they're leading us and showing us the way to a potential new future. So I'm excited about our discussion today, excited about our young adults that are here. So Fel, I'm going to turn things over to you to lead us today. We're so glad you're here, and just look forward to what we're going to hear today. God bless.
All right, thank you so much, Craig, and of course, Selby. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very glad to have our actually four panelists this afternoon. We have Robbie Frederickson, who is the Youth and Young Adult Ministry Director at Central United Methodist Church in Stockton and Los Gatos United Methodist Church. Sarah Tilema, who is our minister in UC Davis at California House. Boots, as we call him, Bautista, the Youth and Young Adult Minister at St. Paul United Methodist Church in Fremont. And I don't see Nia Mateolona yet, but she is.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Phil?
Oh, there she is. Okay, I don't see her video, but Nia Mateolona, the Youth and Young Adult Director at Hillsdale United Methodist Church, is also joining the panel. And we're sorry to hear that Rebecca Bernstein, who is originally part of this panel, is not able to join us because she had a motorcycle accident last week. And let's pray for her, and she's recuperating. Piggybacking on what Craig mentioned earlier, that we're facing pandemic, COVID-19, and at the same time, social unrest because of the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others. So let me address our panelists this afternoon as we are entering this webinar room, a big room. John Wesley asked the question, which is a late 18th century question to the circuit riders: how is it with your soul? And it's the same question as how is it with your spirit? Or how is it with your whole being? As a Filipino American, I try to see what that soul is in my being. And this doesn't come in an order, but whoever feels who would like to share, please go ahead. And maybe Sarah, if you may get started. How is it with your soul? How is your spirit in the midst of all of this?
It's a simple question that is extremely difficult to answer, but it has been a challenging few months, and it seems. But I had a conversation with some of my students yesterday about how I explained it as compounding angst, where it feels that as we have navigated this time of pandemic, it's been a challenging time with lots of learning curves, and we've had to quickly adjust in many, many ways in pretty much all facets of life. So that has been something that we have already been dealing with on a daily basis. And then, of course, systemic racism has been there the entire time. Pandemic has as well. It's not a new thing, but in these past few weeks, it has been especially apparent in the news cycle, and something that is at the forefront of all of our minds, and has added a whole level of complexity to this element of pandemic. And so I can say that my soul is struggling right now, I could say. as I'm trying to figure out how, as a white woman, to be a good ally in this time, and as a pastor and as a campus minister, how to walk alongside my students as we navigate this time. Yeah. Yeah, I I can say more, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. Robbie.
Wow, that was really well said, Sarah. Kind of
Mhm.
disappointed I'm going after you. But yeah, I think to answer the question, my soul is feeling incredibly unsettled. Unsettled personally, professionally, as things are always in a constant change right now. It feels like every time we're about to get a breather, the world sends us another curveball. And so I feel like there's a sense of exhaustion that's just being felt in my soul in the unsettledness. And so I'm trying to look for God right now because I know that God is present. But I'll be honest, I'm having trouble seeing God as much as I was before all of this. So that's the struggle at the moment.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Nia?
Yes, I know. I know that Robbie and Sarah have said a lot about it, and I am so grateful to have this time to be with you. I'm sorry that you can't see me. I'm not really sure when I try to log in, it only allows me like with audio. So I don't really have any option where I can click, to use the video or the camera or anything. I don't have that option. But anyway, since you still can hear me, yes, it's been hard. It's really, here we are trying to stay focused, with God. We're trying to see how we can be closer to Him at this time of pandemic. I work a few days a week, and then I go home and try to focus in family and do everything that I can. And also we do have a group of young people that hang out together on Monday nights. So it is hard knowing that we, here in the midst of pandemic, quarantine, we stay home, we focus on God, and the more we do that, there's more problems. I'm just grateful that we are safe, and we know that God lives, and we do know that God is taking good care of us, because we are not among those who have the virus. So and that's really why I know that that we are well taken care of. With the Floyd, now with that curfew, and that's even harder, because you need to run down an errand after work and stuff like that. There's nothing opens, and then you don't really need to be on the road at this time. So it's getting, the question, what is going on, this, it's hard. It's really hard to do, but it gives us more time to really focus of what, in what is important, and what do I need to engage in that bring my soul closer to God. I think that's really something that it really allows me to think of doing these days. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nia. And of course, Boots, how is it with your soul? How is your spirit?
Spirit is uneasy. I would say I personally have been very anxious, dealing with everything that goes along with being a human being at this time, being a person of color, also being a youth and young adult leader, and my role in the church, and attempting to, continue building our community. I think within most of the folks that we work with here in Fremont are Filipino American descent, and in our culture, it's really important to have community and gathering, and never experienced a time like this where that was impossible. That's not something that we've ever dealt with, and I think collectively, I worry about the mental health of our folks, as well as myself. I know that there have been times throughout this pandemic where I've been challenged mentally, emotionally, in ways that I didn't even realize were possible. And I wonder what's going on with some of the people who were not able to be in touch with, the folks who are um, struggling and not speaking up, and those who are struggling and not getting the help that they need as well. And I'll qualify a little bit of this. I worked as a social worker. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. I worked as a social worker in Oakland and Alameda County for many years. I've been third person witness to a lot of the systemic racism and trying to combat that within the system of the mental health county, the county mental health establishments, and working with clients who experienced years and decades, not just all of the immediate concerns that are popping up and all the developments that have been happening with Black Lives Matter movement, and trying to kind of process everything, as well as being a strong, keeping a strong face for the folks who I'm working with within the church. So it's been very challenging. It's been very uneasy and very anxious for me.
Thank you, Boots, Nia, Sarah, and Robbie. And friends, this is the same question for each and every one of us. How is it with your soul? How is your spirit? Which maybe some of you have dealt with this question like 2 weeks ago when Matt and Linda led us in our webinar on small group, leading small groups in our churches. But why don't we pause for a few seconds, processing what we felt, what we're feeling, how is it with our soul? And let's be in a moment of silence, thinking about people who are dealing with COVID-19, members of the family, those who are sorrowing, those who are mourning, and we are lamenting. And then at the same time, young people are out on the streets. Barack Obama said, I see the young people and I become so optimistic that major change will happen. Let's pray. Be still and know I am God Almighty. I will be with you in the stillness of your soul. Be still and know I am God Almighty. I will be with you in the stillness of your soul. God, you are here. We are here. We're here together. Amen.
Amen.
As a Filipino American, just like Boots, although I'm a first generation Filipino American, I never learned how to express my feelings. And so you, as youth directors, are working with your youth and young adults. And during this time of the pandemic and ongoing protests, what are some of the feelings that you're hearing from your youth and maybe even young adults that you would be able to share in this panel conversation? And how are you dealing with them? How are you listening to this expression of feelings in an online and not in person, face-to-face meetings? Anyone who would like to go ahead? Or maybe it's easier. Boots, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. We as there's a 5-day retreat that happens within the UMC here in the Cal Nevada Conference, where we call it Christmas Institute. So between Christmas and New Year's, we spend 5 days in the mountains and we retreat. And along with that, we actually have a staff of young adults, between 40 and 60 young adults who volunteer their time to give and be a part of this retreat and make it a powerful experience for the youth in our conference as well. But as a group, we've been struggling. We tried to stay in communication. We had a town hall type meeting on Monday, and a lot of the feelings were around, what can I do right now? And I think so many people of that generation, of within their 30s to 40s, 20s, see things so much differently than their parents. You know, their politics are very different. Their beliefs around human rights are very different, equality, acceptance and tolerance for all. And so there's a big gap in between the generation prior that, you know, many of them are living within the same households. Many of them are still under their, you know, supervision, under their autonomy. And so it's really difficult for a lot of our young adults to be able to express themselves, to feel what they're feeling without being told it's not valid, without being told that they need to go pray, they need to go read the Bible. And like I was saying, some of the energy that comes with outrage is the desire to do it now. And so what we're getting is a lot of people who are desperate to want to understand, who want to learn, and don't realize that this takes years to not only understand, to really kind of fully grasp the difficult, the complexity of the problems and things that are causing them to continue, and as well as just wanting so much to be able to like do something right now. So donating, signing petitions, sharing on social media, and everybody is wanting to do to show, hey, I'm in support. But I don't know that that is very filling, in that it doesn't create solutions. It just kind of spreads more and more of these same feelings of anxiety and inadequacy and, you know, desire for change without results. And so I think that's been the past week. If I can speak on behalf of our community, is that's kind of where we are, is we want so badly to affect some change and not feeling empowered, not feeling equipped, not feeling as though we have ability to do so.
Right. Especially when youth as children are not that open in sharing their feelings with their own parents. So Sarah, you are in the campus ministry, and what are some of the feelings that college students, young adults, are sharing, and how are you listening, and how are you dealing with them?
Yeah, so I'm a campus minister at UC Davis at CA House, and this week is our last week of instruction for our spring quarter. So we're kind of wrapping up this year, and the pandemic started right around the time that we began this quarter. So these students have pretty much, their entire spring quarter was online, and all social gatherings for the most part were virtual. And so I've seen kind of waves in how students are doing in the midst of this pandemic. I think that it started with shock, this kind of this novelty of, oh, we're gonna do this everything online, and this sense of, I think it was almost like an adrenaline rush of like, okay, we got to react really quickly. We're going to do this. And then a couple weeks later, I would say that the grief really started to set in, especially for those who are graduating, whether they're undergraduate seniors or graduate students who are transitioning on to whatever comes next post UC Davis. There's a lot of rites of passages that come with wrapping up your college years. And I can say also, even though my ministry is with college students, this is similar to the youth in our churches who are promoting from middle school or graduating high school as well. So there's a lot of grief around wrapping up a time without getting to have these rites of passages that they've been expecting to come for years and years. And especially for college students, knowing that their time in a singular geographic location is coming to a close much faster than they thought. So a lot of people didn't get to say goodbye to their friends, whether they're graduating or not, because lots of people's situations are changing. Anyway, that's to say, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of processing that we've been doing throughout the quarter, and allowing a space for people to express that grief, and processing through lament as a spiritual practice to process through that. But I can also say that while there's been a lot of grief, I've found that during this time, our conversations have been exceptionally honest and raw, and that students are really encouraging each other to name these moments of grief, as well as the moments of joy that they're experiencing and that they're being surprised by. And we're all learning from each other in so many ways, how we respond in the face of these unprecedented and very unexpected times. So I've seen a lot of good coming out of the conversations that students are having, while also recognizing this has been an extremely challenging time for many of the young adults that I'm working with. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Just trying to process what I heard from Boots earlier. We wanted to do something now, that urgency. I heard from you, Sarah, about grief, mourning, separation, and other feelings that they have shared with honesty. And Robbie, as a youth director at both churches, is also very close to University of the Pacific in Stockton. And Robbie, please feel free to share what are those feelings or concerns that your young people are sharing with you. And I know that it's been very challenging, as Sarah mentioned, we are in this unprecedented situation in the life of the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of what Boots and Sarah already said, and maybe add in that, especially as the waves have kind of come and the different emotions and feelings are coming in different experiences, they're right now and over the last several weeks, I have felt like there's this sense of throwing up their arms in frustration. And I feel like there's this sense of no longer trusting the institutions that they once leaned on. Because when all of this started, they were scared, and not many of the institutions were ready to say, we know you're scared and we're going to hold your hand through this. And continuing on, those institutions that have been the biggest part of their life really didn't have a plan for how to step in and help kind of fill the void that they were experiencing. And so that sense of like continued frustration and confusion and being scared and not really being met with a sense of it's going to be okay, we understand and we are with you, has now left many of them to just feel incredibly frustrated and ready to throw up their hands and say, well, I'm done with this. Like I have several students who at the end of their semester just weren't going to their classes anymore because they were frustrated, they were done. They would regularly talk about how this teacher didn't know how to run an online class, and they would spend 40 out of the 60 minutes just helping the teacher, work their Zoom account, and it was just a waste of time, all the way to not having a church that would respond in a way that really let them know that we're here for them. So yeah, it's been hard to walk alongside with them right now because there's so much pain and grief and hurt. Thankfully, there are some joys, and I'm glad Sarah echoed that they, or said that they have been willing to lift them up, because they are willing to share, but they're a lot further away from one another. There's a lot more grief and pain being processed through right now.
Thank you, Robbie. Frustration with the major disruptions in their lives. And I'm really glad to see how we are very diverse in our panel. Although I must admit that as people of color, I'm pretty, I really don't see a lot in our Zoom as far as the gallery is concerned, how African Americans, of course, in our annual conference should be part of this ongoing conversation. But Nia, of course, is a Pacific Islander Tongan American. And would you like to share with us what are the feelings that youth and young adult Tongans, are they sharing? Are they open in what they're dealing with during this time of the pandemic and the social unrest that
when the pandemic first started, I believe everybody were thinking that it's a temporary, like it's just a 1 month or maybe a few weeks of quarantine. And I do know that we didn't really have anything going on at our church for the young people during that time, but we were hoping they will join us, for the worship services, which, I think some of our young people were missing in action from those services. But some of the things that I heard from them was, they were kind of confused, especially those that were in school. We only have a few that, I think a couple graduating from college and high school, and then the rest were younger generation. But I do know that they were not, at first they were excited about, being graduated. And then the next thing I know, they were kind of confused. There is not going to be any graduation. It's been postponed. And so the next thing I know, the announcement, oh yeah, there's going to be in Zoom. The graduation will be in Zoom. So yes, the grief is there. I know it's hard for them because it's we have been, they were expecting more than just a Zoom graduation, but at the same time I believe they're just happy that they graduated. And some so we have a hangout lounge on Mondays, and I do know that sitting home, being home, they feel they feel it's okay, it's good, to be home, but at the same time they need to be with their friends. I think a couple of them may say they are still working, they still go to work every day, and a couple of people were saying they can't work, they have to stay home. So I do know that parents have been happy that they have time together with their children. It's more likely quality time at home with parents, but I think they need, that may be true, but I do know that they are still out there, hanging out with friends, which is really hard because we try to tell them, to be safe, but they're still out there hanging out with friends. Probably that's the only time that they enjoy, bonding with each other. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nia. And I, as a parent myself, how many times do I text my children? And then hours will pass that I haven't received any text back. But now they have children, and parents are having more time to be together. It's like crisis offers more opportunity, right? But they're confused, and just like the frustrations that was shared earlier. And I'm pretty sure that our friends as participating in this Zoom webinar are also dealing with feelings that their young people are sharing with them. I had a meeting like maybe 3 weeks ago, and Robbie was part of that meeting. When the first time I heard about, I'm really Zoom out. It's the same thing as like I'm burned out. Online virtual ministries and you as youth directors, ministers are working so hard in making opportunities of the crisis. But can you name maybe 2 or 3 ministries that are working well virtually online that our colleagues and constituents may learn from what you're doing? Because this is very challenging. Why don't we get started with you, Robbie?
Yeah, one of the actually surprising ministries that kind of took off and have been going on really well since the beginning of all of this was our Bible studies. Our Bible studies before the pandemic pretty much had 1 to 4 people showing up to them. And once the pandemic started, we actually joined the 2 churches that I work with for an online Bible study. And we now have 12 to 15 who weekly come out, and literally it's just reading 2 chapters of Acts and slowly going through it. And they've really enjoyed having that time together. So I've been pleasantly surprised that a Bible study that wasn't well attended before is now one of the highlights of the week.
Wow, great, great. Sarah?
Yeah, so Zoom fatigue is very real. And
Yeah.
a lot of students are feeling, especially when they're in class all day now on a screen, and then all of their extracurriculars are on a screen, hanging out with their friends is on a screen. And I think that there's this assumption that we often make that young people love their screens and this is their dream. That's certainly not the case. I would say that young people are also getting very tired of looking at their screens all the time. That's at least what I'm hearing from my students I work with. And so I'm also very encouraged by the creativity that many groups are coming up with on how to address this. So at CA House, one of the things that I found to be really successful is thinking of ways to engage with our young people with physical things. So even though we can't gather together in physical presence, there's lots of things that we can do like with deliveries and things that can engage more senses than just our eyes and a screen. And so one of our partner campus ministries at Davis during Holy Week, they did Holy Week in a box. And so they had different items in a box for each of the different liturgical holidays that fell during Holy Week. And I heard that that went over extremely well with their students. And so, and they got really creative on that. I know one of the things that I have done that's been really successful is a book club. And so I've heard from students that being sent a physical copy of a book and being able to read it, and we particularly do young adult fiction. So it's a read that is very enjoyable while also often addressing really complex topics. So it's a fun extracurricular for them, but also gets their eyes away from a screen. Unless, of course, they want to read it on Kindle, which is a screen, but also reading is engaging perhaps a different part of our brain. But I've been willing to order those books and have it sent to them so that then we do have to meet for a Zoom gathering to discuss, but they've enjoyed the time to be able to read in that way. Another project that we're releasing this week is we put together an audio project. So we did this with a group of interfaith organizations at Davis, where we all contributed some sort of centering or meditation exercise from our traditions through an audio form. So rather than it being a video, it's something that people can just listen to on their phone and perhaps go on a walk and practice some sort of centering exercise. So it's allowing them to practice centering and meditation and prayer while and in community, because there's others that are participating with you without having to be looking at a screen. And that's also we're really excited. We're releasing that tomorrow, and I'm really excited to offer that to students. So
that's very exciting. Book club, reading. What did you say again? In a box, Sarah?
Oh, there was Holy Week in a box, which
Holy
you
Week
could
in a
probably
box.
do Pentecost in a box,
Right.
Trinity Sunday in a box. There's all sorts of things that
Yeah.
you could probably do.
Of course, we celebrated Pentecost Sunday last Sunday, and that's very appropriate. And Robbie, going back to you, reading the book of Acts, if your young people would be able to complete reading that, then go and read Luke as well, and then compare the two with the history of the church and the Gospel of Luke. Hey,
We actually did that.
Okay,
sorry,
yeah.
we actually did that. We finished the book of Luke and then went into the book of Acts. And
Oh, there you go. I haven't talked to you about that, but wow, yeah, that's good to hear. Hey, Boots, your turn, yeah.
Yeah, so the young adults are always a tricky group. We've set up our ministry, my chopping in and out. So our young adults have always been a bit of a tricky group. I'm new in my position since January 2019, and I was hired specifically to lead the youth and to see what I can do with the young adults in terms of galvanizing a community and creating a ministry that was more central to their needs. And so really the feedback that I was getting was that they wanted something that would fit a little better than Sunday mornings into their lives, and trying to think a little bit more holistically about the person. And, coming from a mental health background, I really want to engage them in ways that they would be able to like develop their sense of identity within the church. And I think as a youth, you're kind of told where your place is. You're given so many opportunities to like serve in this way, and hopefully that leads into something later on. And so I think with the young adults, we've tried to be a lot more intentional with this is your opportunity to discover, your place within the church, your place within the ministry, your place, and, explore your passions. And so one of the tricky things is that not all of them are available to meet. So when the pandemic hit, it was actually a nice little boost. We had, people who were willing and able to sit in front of a screen and engage in conversation that was honest, and some growth. And I think, we quickly hit that zoomed out wall, where after a few weeks of doing that, where we had a lot of people kind of engaging, it quickly grew tired and people's other emotions started taking over, and it became just less and less important. So we stopped focusing so much on the mental health aspect of it and tried to promote more positive things. We've been doing something called Flow Favorites, or we're Flow Ministries because it should flow within your life. So we try to think of ourselves in that way. So it is a drop-in, and nobody is committed to coming every week, and those who are interested are coming because they desire to. But that also creates, attendance problems. Sometimes we have 2 people, sometimes we have 15 people, sometimes we have, just me showing up, and it can be a little tricky. So one thing I have been very open about is that I want this to be a place that people feel empowered. And so kind to, pull in more people to organize these events and not just let it be one person, grasping at straws, trying to pull people in. So we've done some cooking demonstrations, which have actually been really interesting to do. I made some pizza for our young adults, and I hand delivered the ones that I made to the people who attended so that they were able to participate in that way. We also have done like exercise type things. We've been doing open discussions, just, about our emotions, about things that are going on. And within our youth group, I've been working a lot on trying to let them be in control of the group. So I think at this point, we have a council of 5 or 6 middle and high school aged kids who are making the decisions for everything that we do within the youth group. I'm there to help guide them, but for the most part, they've been very creative. They've waxed and waned with their motivation in terms of, they're very tired of engaging with people on Zoom and just want to go back to normal. I feel that same tug on my heart. Is just, I just want to see you and hug you guys and like let you know that I'm actually here. And I can't do that so well through the computer. I don't feel like it's the same. But what I have been trying to do is kind of push them a little bit to take over. And so they've come up with some amazing ideas. They've actually started a pen pal program. Kids don't know how to write letters or how to address them. So we kind of went through the whole process of that. Like, where do you put the stamp? Where do you put your name? What's an address? And we got that going. So now they're excited to like receive mail. And also we're trying to engage them on social media, trying to do these shout outs, sharing joy and sharing love. As well as we've actually done a really successful art night. So what we did was we just kind of gave them, grab a piece of paper, grab a pencil, draw what you are feeling throughout the pandemic. And we just sat there like kind of in silence for about an hour with some music on. And at the end, we all shared what we were drawing, and it was just very relaxing, very like serene in the midst of a really, really tumultuous time. And it was nice to be able to kind of take that pause, express ourselves in other ways besides words, and be together in a way. So another, things that have been really helpful too, we do a lot of movie nights. We continue to meet every Friday for our youth. So I let them choose kind of specifically things that have to do with character. So a lot of movies and a lot of shows that we can discuss, what did this person do that led them to that road, and how can like we relate that to our own lives. So letting them kind of choose the media and then trying then to pull that into, the kingdom of God in some ways.
Thank you so much, Boots. Creativity, patience. These are the things
One more
that I'm
thing.
getting from. Yeah.
I also serve on the praise team at our church, and with young adults, that's where most of our young adults are engaged. They love music and they love to be a part of the team. And it's been really challenging. We can't be together, so we've been doing these recordings where somebody plays an instrument and somebody records on top of that, and we edit it all together and create a praise song.
Right.
So that's been one way to really have something positive, that we are creating something together, and we're still making music and harmonizing and bringing all those talents for the goodness of God. So that's been something that's really been uplifting for our community.
That's very good. Good to hear. Before I call on Nia, Craig, how are we? Are we good with the time?
Well, we are at 4:48, so if we want to have time for Q&A from our group, we probably want to finish in about 10 minutes or so if we can. So we have enough time for Q&A.
All right.
Sounds good.
So that, thank you. So that we can give our friends, the time that you can respond to some of the questions. Let's put it this way. I'll call on Nia first. And I know that worship is very challenging. How are you engaging the youth and the young adults to attend online worship? And what attracts them? Just a very brief answer to that, Nia, if you don't mind.
Well, I can say that, it's very challenging. At first, they really show that they really need Bible study, online Bible study. So we have not started a Bible study yet, but we started out with forming like teams, and they do presentations. They come in teams and do presentations for each other, and it's really good. It looks like they're very creative. So it pretty much, they just take on, the whole program, and then they are very good in doing these things. So that's part of the things that we are doing, and I know that they show interest in Bible studies. So that's something that we need to do. And even if the pandemic time will be over, probably we will just keep some time, some online sessions in Zoom. It looks like it's good, but just like what Boots said, it can be challenging at times because some of them are working, and I'm sure they can log in because if they go to text messages and use the phone while working, I'm sure they can log in. But I know that their excuse now is they're working, and they will come in whenever they are available. So we have few people this time, and next time it's more, and but it's not really steady attendance. So that the attendance is not really, is still probably a slow startup. This is going to be a 4th week.
Robbie, Sarah, Boots, would you like to respond to that? How are you engaging them in worship? Is it really attracting them, or they don't show up in any online worship?
Our church services are very traditional, and definitely do not have the target audience of young people in mind. Therefore, the way that we've been engaging young people to be active in the service is to actually take on parts of the worship service. So we pre-record all of our service components during the week and then put it together for one video to be released on Sunday. And we've recruited both youth individually and youth families to be active in reading scripture together for the service, and we get them on Zoom and record them that way. Or we have special musicians who will come in, who are youth and young adults, and will record a song for us that we use as kind of meditative time after the sermon's done. So those are the ways that we've been engaging to have them participating in service. But youth who aren't participating in that way are not showing up to church service unless their parents are forcing them to sit in front of the screen.
All right. And brief quick answer, Boots or Sarah?
As I was sharing, the praise and worship has been a real key part in terms of keeping those who serve engaged. I don't know, we do ours via Facebook, and I don't check to see who's on there, and I don't make sure that I don't call anyone if they're not. But it's really apparent that this is something that is challenging because it makes it difficult on a Sunday morning when you had to go to work, when you had to be in class, when you had to be in youth group Friday night for 4 hours in front of a screen to then sit and listen to something you would normally stare at your phone at a lot for our kids. So I understand where they're coming from, and it is really difficult to, we're a much more traditional service at this point, given that we don't have the praise and music, the praise and worship, which makes it more contemporary. So just having those moments where our praise team can create something and be a part of the Sunday morning service has been really important to keep us engaged.
Okay. All right. Let me pick up this question from the Q&A, and I'll ask Sarah to respond to this. From Alison Mackey, my youth really love playing games. Any ideas of games you can adopt to Zoom? Thinking charades, texting the prompt to each kid. What else? And who would like to respond to that? Sarah and then Boots?
Well, I can say, I don't know, for those of you who have not heard of Jackbox games, that's a really great place to start. So if you go to, I don't know if any Boots,
Jackbox.tv.
Can you purchase the games there though? Okay, good. So go to jackbox.tv, and basically the way that it works is you can play these games through a screen. So if you're in Zoom, you can screen share, and everybody can see it and interact with their own phone. And they're super fun games. There's like a whole bunch of them. The game Quiplash or Drawful are really good games to start with if you don't know where to start. So that's a really easy way to engage with games with youth right now.
Great. And of course, thank you, Boots. Boots typed it in the chat box.
Right. Yeah. And if I want to ask Sarah if she probably maybe it's best that you put it up somewhere where everyone, like all the participants, will will see it too.
Besides the chat, because we have Boots just typed it in the chat. I can also
you suggested other games, and that's why I was wondering.
Oh, you mean the games? Yes, I can do that. Yes, thank you.
Anything that will help the other churches. Yeah.
And of course, Kalusita typed the Bible Jeopardy game as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. That's the first question I received. And let's see, before I call on, okay. This question is really in line with the last question that I wanted to ask you from Gail Baston. Any plans or ideas about engaging youth and young adults in discussions about white privilege or Christians engaging in the eradication of systemic racism? Thank you, Gail, for that question. So who would like to respond to that?
Yeah, we're going to be doing a two-part run through this summer with our programming. We're going to do a book group for parents on the book Raising White Kids, and it's about understanding how to essentially engage racial injustices while being white, and how to do that in an appropriate way. And then we're also going to be with our youth going through a book called Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome, which kind of explains how what we're dealing with right now is from the ripple effects of slavery, and how that's affected over the last couple hundred years. So that's what we're planning on doing this summer.
Thank you. Boots, would you like to respond to that question? Especially, I learned that your church will be hosting like a town hall meeting about racial injustice. Yeah, go ahead.
The focus that I've been asked to be a part of is helping our community being able to kind of process their own feelings, as well as being able to find ways to be in relationship with the family members who are not in line with them. And so I was speaking a little bit about, speaking from a person of my age and my generation, there is a very quick response to something that we find offensive, is that to draw a line in the sand. If you're on Instagram, they say, unfollow me and block me if this is something you disagree with, because we cannot be in relationship if you don't get this about me. And so there's so much of that, I think, within the young people's hearts, is that they just want to say, like, if you don't understand what I'm saying, then we cannot. And that includes parents, that includes aunts, uncles, elder people than them in the church, and feeling like they're not in the right place. You know, there was a large discussion, and when we began forming this ministry for young adults in early 2019, when the special conference happened and the vote that took place, and you know, young adults not being able to see eye to eye with where their parents are coming from, and their conservative values, and a lot of them coming from the Philippines, or just harboring a lot of these colonial mentalities that we've been kind of programmed with, and trying to, you know, be a Filipino American and hold these values that we support one another, that we're inclusive of one another, that we're tolerant of literally everything that we can be, besides hate and besides racism and things like that. And so just trying to navigate within the community and trying to find ways that people can find bridges to not have to cut off relationships, to not have to feel like this person doesn't understand this, so I have to distance myself from them, and just kind of, you know, find more understanding. And we're trying to focus on that.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah, you are in a ministerial context of interfaith college students. So any plans that they will be engaged in any discussion, especially in addressing systemic racism and white privilege?
Yeah, so we have plans to start a reading group going through some critical texts regarding systemic racism throughout the summer. We'll see what that looks like. And I also have a recommendation for those who, I brought up young adult fiction earlier, but I can't underemphasize how much I love young adult fiction as a tool for having really challenging conversations. And so there's a book in particular called The Hate You Give. They made a movie of it. It directly addresses police brutality in a way that was very accessible for students. And so it came out, I think, in 2018. It's by Angie Thomas. I highly recommend it. I also highly recommend the audiobook version of it, if that's something you're able to do as a group or encourage your students to do. But I also, if you're in a context where you're working with young adults, I encourage you to ask your students directly how you can address this, because a lot of them already have ideas on how they want to take up leadership in addressing systemic racism. So I think that even just asking the question can do a lot of good, because we have really creative students who are really incredible. And so if you just ask the question, sometimes that can be, what do you want to see happen so that we can learn about this together? Or what action are you wanting to see take place to address this? You might be surprised by the really amazing ideas that they come up with. And then, of course, that requires us to then hear it and respond and give them the tools to take up the leadership of those actions as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And of course, Nia, would you like to respond to that? How were the Pacific Islanders, the young adults, any plan to engage them in any discussion about systemic racism that is really rampant?
Well, again, it's hard to tell. They're pretty much very aggressive with their own their relationship, with each other, and also whatever they do to enforce them and then engage them, with God. I do know by talking with some of the young adults, especially the young adults, they like to to have the consistent relationship, with, I think someone mentioned to me the other day that, if the pastor will have sermons online, they really, really want to stay with that. But the challenge about the Tongans, it's whether they want to be where, like at the service. I think what the parents will tell them to do, they will be there. So it's more likely, I think especially the young people. For example, I will have to demand, they will have to meet my demand to be where they're supposed to be, but not necessarily that they will be there, but that's really my wish and my hope. And also the parents will want their kids to be engaged with all the things that are happening at the church, but at the same time, not necessarily that they will stay engaged to that. So, but to be honest with you, they are good kids. They have been very helpful, and when it's time for them to do something or engage in doing something for the church, they are there, and they're very, they're very good with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much. We're wrapping this up now. And before I turn it over to Craig, thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Boots and Nia, especially even though it's a very short notice earlier. I just wanted you all to see my shirt. I'm wearing this in order to let people know why are we lifting our left arm in fist in protest, because this is so close to the heart. And so when we advocate for justice and peace and we raise our left arm, closed fist, that means this is so close to the desires of our heart, justice. And where there is no justice, there is no peace. Thank you so much. And if we can give virtual or the gesture of thanking our panelists for this evening. Thank you so much. And I give it back to our main host, Reverend Craig Brown.
All right, thanks everyone. What a great panel today. So thankful. Before I turn things over to Selby to do some announcements, and then I'll come back and share with you what's next week. I have to give a shout out to my brother Fel, because I got a package this week in the mail from my brother Fel. And he sent me the most rockin' face mask that I continue to get the best compliments on. Here it is. Pretty awesome. It's my Marvel superhero mask. So Fel, you're the man.
You're very welcome. So I'm learning the skill of sewing. So thank you.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it.
You're a master. Well played. I'm going to turn things over to our Director of Communications, Selby Ewing. She's got a couple of announcements about what's coming up in the life of our annual conference. Then I'll be back at the end to tell you about next week. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists, Boots, Nia, especially at the last minute. You're awesome. And Robbie and Sarah, as always, thank you so much for your leadership, for all of you. What a gift.
Thank you, Greg.
What a great panel. I just echo everything that Craig just said. How wonderful to, number one, meet you all. And now I can follow you and know who you are and see all of the things you want to do and will be doing. I want to just highlight a really quick announcement. Please send me your stories of what you're doing in your local community to make a difference. We send out an e-newsletter every Thursday, and we're always wanting to emphasize the stories in the local church. We always have conference stories, jurisdiction stories, global UMC stories, but I have a particular heart for local community. And so please send me your stories. And you can, the website shows you how to send them. Also, my email is on the website under staff, so you'll be able to see me. I want to just let everybody know that every week we have several different consistent offerings. We post a spiritual nurture reflection based on the coming passages that'll be read on Sunday morning from the Revised Common Lectionary. These reflections are just really meaningful and very personal. And Then we, of course, have the Wednesday webinars, which are, we learn, we meet each other, just like this session, which was so wonderful. And then, of course, the newsletter. So we got a lot going on. We're going to have a lot more going on. So please stay in touch, stay on the site. You can engage with us anytime on Facebook and Twitter. So let's start hanging out and chatting together as often as you'd like. Craig, back to you.
All right, thanks, Selby. A lot of going on in the life of our annual conference, so thankful for Selby and the staff of our communications department doing a great job. I just want to remind you that on the conference website, you can find the Wednesday webinars on the right side of the web page. If you go to cnumc.org, scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a large button on the right that says Wednesday webinar, and that's where you can find the recordings of all of our Wednesday webinars we've had so far. And we have a couple of them from last week that's missing, and that's because we had to kind of glue together some videos, so it's taken a little longer for us to produce that one, so we'll get it posted soon and have it there for you. I want to share with you what's coming up next week and even the week after, because we have some really interesting things coming. I'm glad Selby mentioned Facebook and Twitter, because next week we're going to focus on social media and how to use social media in not only the midst of pandemic, but also in the midst of what we're dealing with across the country in terms of the protest for civil rights and against institutional racism. And we've invited the Reverend Sadie Stone to come back. Sadie was one of our panelists on a discussion we had a few weeks ago, and she's going to be presenting next week about how her church, Bethany United Methodist Church in San Francisco, has leveraged social media to do some remarkable things in the city and remarkable things in life for a church. So I'm excited to share with you some of the strategies that she's employed. It's really going to be helpful, I think, to many of our churches to understand how to use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and any other social media platform. So hope you'll make plans to join us next Wednesday. The Wednesday after that, we're also excited that we get to introduce to you a new person in our midst, a new leader coming into the life of our annual conference. Our new Director of Leadership Development, Dr. Reginald T.W. Nichols, will be with us on the 17th of June, and we're looking forward to introducing Reggie to all of you. We're so blessed to have him come join us. He's leaving his position as the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Warner Pacific University and is coming to join us starting on June 15th. So on June 17th, he will be our guest on the Wednesday webinar, and I'll be doing a little interview with him so you can get to know him a little better. I'm excited that he's going to be with us and look forward to sharing him with all of you. We're so thankful that you were here today and glad you could be a part of this conversation. Again, thanks to all of our panelists. What a remarkable group of leaders you all are. And thank you for helping point the way for the future of the church. Nia, Robbie, Boots, Sarah, wonderful. Just so thankful for you and your voice and your leadership. And of course, Fel, what can I say? You have done such an awesome job of coordinating and working with our youth and young adult leaders across the annual conference. Thank you for the ministry you have and the work that you do. You're a blessing to us all. We will see all of you next week. Until then, be blessed and go with God. Amen.